Welcome to day 14 of Western civilization. Our focus today is going to examine the Mongol Empire. Now, if we take a look, there are some notable locations today: the steppes of Central Asia, Karakoram, and the four Khanates of China, Persia, Russia, and Central Asia. And we'll go over to those in detail here in just a moment. Some notable dates today are 1206 CE. That's when Genghis Khan achieves his power. 1227, that's the death of Genghis Khan. And 1368, which is the end of the Mongol Khanate. Now, before we start, we've got to examine who are the Mongols. The Mongols were a nomadic people, and a nomad essentially is a member of a tribe that really has no permanent abode or housing, but rather moves from place to place. In addition, the Mongolians were organized into tight-knit families, clans, and tribes as well. They resided kind of in the steppe areas of Central Asia, and you can take a look up here at modern present-day Mongolia, and you can see kind of where these steppes would be at in that country. And in the image below, this is essentially what the landscape looks like. Now, the steppes are a bigger region with all of Central Asia, and I have a picture here in just a moment what that'll look like. But you can see, guys, it's essentially a wide open plain. And so within this wide open plain, there are a lot of competing rival tribes, and Genghis Khan, also known as Chinggis Khan, is eventually going to forge these tribes together and create what we will know in history as the Mongol Empire. So, like I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, here are the grasslands or the steppes of different parts of the world. The region that we're going to focus on is going to be over here in Central Asia. But you can also see there's a big one here that goes from Central Asia today into essentially Eastern Europe. And as we look at the expansion of the Mongol Empire, they're going to follow this path. It's going to be like a path really to Europe that the Mongolians are going to take advantage of. So this map indicates some Mongol conquests. If we take a look here, what I want to draw your attention to is the location where the Mongol Empire essentially comes from. Now, Genghis Khan himself doesn't establish a capital city, but his successors do. And that's where Karakoram is, right here. And so what we see is that the Mongolians are going to use this as their base as they extend their power base through East Asia, South Asia, and into Central Asia and Eastern Europe. Now, Genghis Khan was originally born by a different name, Temujin, and he was born into a noble family. But like I said, the tribal rivalries were very severe, and his father was poisoned by rivals, and young Genghis himself had to survive alone. He was captured. He does kind of have a daring escape where he able is to kind of run from his captors. And what this does is this is really going to harden him as an individual, where he's able to have no mercy on those that are out to get him. And to be honest, this is eventually what was very beneficial for the Mongolian Empire, because when Chinggis Khan comes to power in 1206, he's able to unite a lot of these warring tribes together through a process of diplomacy, but also using forcible means if it's called for. And eventually he's going to have the title of Khan, which means universal ruler. The Mongol Empire, as you can see, is going to exist from 1206 to 1368 CE. So that's a pretty long time for an empire. Now, we talked about this a little bit. Chinggis Khan did not establish a central capital. It was his successors that did that. The Mongols had extremely outstanding equestrian skills. That means they're able to ride on horseback or work with horses. They were essentially growing up on horses. They were on a horse around age 3, and they used this for everything. For blitz warfare, they adapted their weapons to kind of work with equestrian skills and stuff like that. And in this time period, this is kind of like the version of the tank, if you will. They were able, by using the horse and weapons adapted for use on a horse, able to really deliver some damage to regional powers. Again, take a look at this, the Mongol Empire under the campaign of Genghis Khan, the stuff in the red there you can take a look at and pause at any time, and then the campaigns of his successors as well. So you can see this, even though this part of the world is very desolate, however, the expansion of the Mongol Empire it's immense. It's huge. It's one of the largest empires that's ever going to exist in world history. Now, the conquest of China, kind of the first focus of the Mongolian horde, was in 1211 CE, and they, by 1220, were able to establish control over northern China. Now, 1227, Genghis Khan died. He had great contributions to the Mongolian Empire. Number one, he united the Mongols. Secondly, he exerted control over China in the east and won control over Persia in the west. Now, some of the drawbacks or blunders of Genghis's rule was that there was no established government, and there really wasn't an established clear heir to the empire following his death. So what we have then is that the empire itself becomes divided, and eventually it's that division that's going to implode upon itself. Now, as you can tell, the most important institution of the Mongolian state was the army. It took a small population's power and magnified it greatly. For example, in the 13th century, there were about 1 million Mongols, and this was at that time, 1% of China's population. And they're able to take China and put them on their knees and force them into submission to Mongolian rule. Often enemies surrendered without resistance, and the reason why is because the Mongolians used a combination of just overall brutal warfare. They also used psychological warfare, and the reputation nonetheless often preceded them before their arrival. So feel free to just watch this loop. What we can see is just the time lapse of the expansion of the Mongol Empire, starting in 1206, and watch it grow, and then following kind of when the Mongolian Empire breaks apart, you can see the 4 separate areas that happen. Now, in the power vacuum, there's a huge competition between family members, and what we see eventually happens is that the Mongol realm is going to be divided into 4 regional empires. The Great Khans, those were located in China, and these were some of the wealthiest lands of the empire itself. Okay, the Khanate of Central Asia, the Ilkhans of Persia, and the Golden Horde of Russia. This map kind of shows where these Khanates are located. Now, Khan is just a universal ruler, so a Khanate is just kind of the overall territory in which these powers rule. So feel free to stop and pause this video and take a look at some of the locations or areas that rule is applied under the Khanates. Now, the Mongolians were able to really unite the area under some kind of overall governorship, and essentially what this does is this does protect trade routes from east to west. Now, this is good for the most part. However, in the 1330s, there is a problem that emerges that actually uses this path of diffusion and takes its way into Europe, and it's going to bring forth the bubonic plague. So anyways, 1330, the plague erupts in southwest China. By the 1340s, about a decade later, it reaches southwest Asia and Europe. Now, the Mongols were not immune to this disease, and in fact, kind of their involvement within the region expedited or sped up the growth of the bubonic plague. Now, the bubonic plague, and we'll talk a lot more about this tomorrow, but it killed more than half of the exposed population, caused a huge amount of depopulation and labor shortages, and plague conditions and oppression fostered a dislike or a hatred for these Mongolian rulers, and eventually it's going to force a revolution of sorts against Mongol rule. In the wake of the Mongol decline, Turkish power dominated the region. First and foremost is a Turkish individual named Timur. Historians also refer to him as Timurlen. He is a ruthless ruler, and you can see with this map right here, this is essentially his empire in Central Asia. Now, eventually, his ruler is going to decline, and in the wake of his ruler, we see the emergence of the Muslim Turkish states that are growing, specifically the Mughal Empire, the Safavid, and the Ottoman empires that we've discussed previously over the course of this class. And that concludes our discussion on the Mongol Empire. Tomorrow, what we'll do is we'll focus on the bubonic plague and its impact that it has on the European populations.